Welcome, everybody. I'm Josh Mackauer, Director of Biodesign. It's great to see everybody here for the first of our Innovators Workbench series for the academic year. Tonight is a special guest, Beth McCombs. What's cool about Beth, she's, of course, Executive Vice President and she's the Chief Technology Officer for BD. But we have an interesting connection, which is that Beth was a Fresh Tech fellow, which actually was the pre Biodesign experience prior to creating Biodesign. Fresh Tech was where we modeled out the Biodesign process back at Pfizer. So it's a really cool connection. So it's a great honor to have her here. She's got a long and extremely successful track record in R&D, and now is a very senior corporate leader at Becton Dickinson, and who has been a tremendous supporter of Biodesign. So it's a real honor, and we really appreciate you being here. I want to thank Wilson Sonsini, Goodrich and Rosati for supporting this event. David Cassak and Medtech Strategist. Dave will be interviewing Beth tonight, and a special shout out to Deja Hill and Jill Hanneman and Antia, who's supporting the event here for Biodesign. If you can, silence your phones, please. We're recording this for posterity, and there will be a short reception after the event here. So I'll hand it off to David. Take it away.
Thanks, Josh. Well, Beth, it's a delight to have you here. I'm not certain how well the full history of Becton Dickinson is known in this industry. And by the way, feel free to share insights into what Josh was like 20 years ago at Fresh Tech at any point you want it. You feel relevant to share that. But Becton Dickinson is one of the great legacy companies in this industry. Simply a powerhouse in its core technologies, and has also undergone some tremendous evolutions, if you want to call it that, over the years. So we're going to get into some of that over the course of the next hour or so. Before they do that, Beth, I wonder if you'd share a little bit of your background. I know you were at Johnson & Johnson before you got to Becton Dickinson. Was that your first job in medical devices? And what did you do at Johnson & Johnson?
So my first full-time job was at Johnson & Johnson in Cincinnati, Ohio, in their minimally invasive ethicon endosurgery business. And it was just an amazing first job because I had the opportunity to work on the Mammotome breast biopsy platform. So it was really, being able to work in women's health and in breast cancer as a very young, engineer. And it was so motivating. And also the cool thing about the Mammotome system is it had everything from high volume disposable to electromechanical and capital systems. So it really allowed me to get my teeth wet in kind of all the aspects of medical device design.
So was a move into Johnson & Johnson a natural path for you from your training before that? Were you trained as an engineer?
Yes, trained as a mechanical engineer. So I did my undergrad and master's at MIT. And as Josh mentioned, between my undergrad and master's, I didn't actually work directly with Josh, but with his protege or successor, Greg Lambrecht, who you may have met through different design and circles. But Greg really, brought me in along with a colleague, Jacob Einhorn from MIT, and we did a immersion in Japan in the orthopedic space and looked at hip implants and had some great insights and opportunity to refine hip implant design to be more suited to the Japanese population that didn't need as much kind of stability and heft, but more range of motion.
Well, Cincinnati was a base for their minimally invasive surgery business, but were you pioneering minimally invasive surgery in orthopedics, or?
So no, I'm sorry. I was just going back to the Fresh Tech.
I see.
Before, yeah. So basically trained as a mechanical engineer, had some, internships, but then, J&J was really the first, full-time, gig for me. And I was mentioning to the Biodesign fellows, I had a kind of a rare epiphany at the age of 18. I knew I wanted to do medtech innovation. My father's an engineer, my mother's a nurse, and I just knew I wanted to use my, technical interests and capabilities to impact healthcare. And it's just been an amazing ride for the last 25 years to be able to do that.
And when did you join BD? And did you join to be Chief Technology Officer?
No, that was not a master plan. So I joined BD about 4 years ago. John DeFord recruited me, and John DeFord has been a big supporter of this program. He's
Right.
the CTO, for BD. I came in to lead the medical segment of for R&D, and then soon after that, John led on to me that he was thinking about retiring and wanted to, prepare me as his successor.
So R&D, you've mentioned R&D a couple of times. What is the role of the CTO, and what's the relationship between the Chief Technology Officer and the head of either the head of R&D or the broader R&D effort?
Yeah, so it can vary from company to company what exactly a Chief Technology Officer does. Sometimes I actually get a lot of emails from outside groups who think I'm the CIO, which is more, the information technology side. But really, the Chief Technology Officer at BD is responsible for end-to-end R&D. So I have all the engineers and scientists working together from the very front end of innovation, and Biodesign is our core front-end innovation process through new product development and then sustaining our in-market portfolio.
So what is your relationship? I mean, how much of the new technology that comes into or out of perhaps Becton Dickinson comes out of an internal R&D effort versus a perhaps an M&A or an alliance program that might be driven by business development?
Yep. Yeah,
what is your relationship to business development?
Sure. Yeah, in medtech and at BD, I think in general, a healthy split is about 50-50, half of your growth coming from organic new product development and then half coming from inorganic. And that's about the balance that we have today, because it allows us to continue to innovate in our core, but also scale up, new and exciting technologies. And so I have a very close relationship with the business development team and strategy. You were just mentioning you were on a panel with Vishy Kanda last week, who's our head of strategy and M&A. So we spend a lot of time together thinking about, what are the big areas for innovation? Where do we want to invest with our organic portfolio as well as in new adjacent spaces?
And how do you work with other functions within Becton Dickinson to shape the technology the product portfolio going forward? I mean, business development is an obvious ally to you, but what's the relationship to the executive suite?
Yep.
Are there other areas of the company that also weigh in on and influence what Becton Dickinson's technology portfolio will look like in the coming years?
Yeah. It's really a combination of, at the corporate level, defining, where we want to be, but also, a bottoms up view from the business units as well. And I think that has been the recipe for success in medtech, is having a fairly decentralized, business unit led organization where, these teams are very close to the customer, close to the market, and can really maintain that innovative edge. But at the same time, having the more kind of corporate view of, what are some of the big trends in healthcare and where do we want to invest, to even disrupt ourselves or to complement. So right now, our organic portfolio is about 40% of our R&D investment is in what we call more of our durable core. So kind of current, areas that we play today. Think of, some of the things that BD is the backbone of healthcare, like vacuum tubes that are used for blood collection, a range of catheters.
Well, BD may not be as well known to some people in this community.
Yeah.
Give us an overview of the key. I mean, I think of Becton Dickinson as blood collection and blood storage, but you're more than that, obviously.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as you mentioned, BD has gone through some major transformation over the last 8 years with two major acquisitions of Cure Fusion and Bard. But maybe I can just walk you through where we are today. We have 3 major segments of our business. So the first is our life sciences business, and we have 2 businesses there. One is our BD Biosciences, and one is our diagnostic systems. And so Biosciences is actually right in our backyard here in San Jose, does really high-end research instrumentation to support, primarily immunology, immuno-oncology research, and has been a real, growth rocket and amazing innovation. And then we have our diagnostic systems, where we have molecular diagnostics and microbiology tools, as well as, moving from core lab to acute and even point of care in that space. And then we have the core of, BD, like our medical segment is probably, again, what BD
Is that what I was
known
thinking?
for. Yeah, the 125-year legacy
Exactly.
of, look at, catheters, tubes, vacuum tubes, all, syringes that have been used for vaccination, those kind of core devices that are made for pennies. And it's just amazing, like how pervasive and if you see the manufacturing, the level of automation is very impressive. But then we also, through the CareFusion acquisition, acquired all the connected medication management systems that are used in a hospital. So everything from the pharmacy all the way to the bedside, and infusion pumps and Pyxis cabinets that are used to manage all of that inventory and make sure the right medication is available to them.
And Bard brought you, I mean, Bard had been a long time.
Yep.
Obviously a catheter company, and I don't sort of had much of a interventional cardiology business by the time the merger happened. What technology areas did Bard bring?
Yeah, and that's really our third segment is our interventional space. So Bard has our peripheral intervention business, which is primarily in oncology and peripheral vascular disease. So more interventional procedures. And then we have our surgical business, which is more, I would say, advanced biomaterials and regenerative medicine type products. And then we have our urology and critical care business that has, Foley catheters as a legacy, but then our PureWick technology, which is really taking off and providing an external solution that we have both for hospital and for home.
So what kind of timeframes do you think about in terms of technology development and technology innovation within BD? I mean, are you plotting now for 2 years from now, 5 years from now?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so you can think in terms of 10 years. What kind of horizons do you think about?
Yeah, we really have to think about all of those horizons, and it really depends on the type of product. And I certainly, a PMA is going to be, a longer road, with clinicals. So that's probably in the 5 to 8 year time frame, where 510Ks are going to be more in the, maybe 2 to 4 year. And then now with software, we can talk about 6 months or even faster. So we're really having to tailor our processes and our clock speed that we operate based on the regulatory pathway and the speed of being able to iterate on the technology.
So Becton Dickinson was, like you said, 125 years, but I mean, so much the dominant force in that portfolio that included needles and syringe and blood collection titles. As CareFusion came into the game and as CR Bard was added to the portfolio, is there an integrated vision of those three companies and technologies? I mean, do you obviously have responsibility for all of them, but do you see them as connected in any way, or really as three separate businesses?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, most of the work is led from a business lens and really optimizing, within the business. I think what both Bard and CareFusion brought was an expansion of capabilities. And so, for example, CareFusion, a lot of smart connected care, software capabilities that really weren't part of core BD, and we're using that foundation of capability and connected medication management to think about how we can also connect, the laboratory and think more holistically, even in the operating room. What can we do with medication management, medication delivery? So I think it was really, in general, we're executing through the businesses, but there's a broader set of capabilities that once we've defined an important need, we can kind of mobilize and shift resources.
When you think about the historical profile of the various technologies that BD has, they seem fairly set. How do you look for? Are there white space opportunities that BD is thinking about or pursuing, or how much do those traditional historic areas of expertise drive where technology is going? Yeah. Or are there obvious white space opportunities that rise on your radar screen?
Yeah, I mean, we think a little more from the viewpoint of an adjacency versus a pure white space, because we want to take advantage of, some aspect of capability that we have to make whatever asset it is if we're purchasing or if we are building it ourselves, to make sure we can be successful and make it real. I was sharing earlier, our organic innovation is skewed more toward, some of the core, but we have defined both for innovation, that's more transformative, as well as, for organic and inorganic, 3 areas that we see, we call the irreversible forces that we see in healthcare, and that we think BD can help operate and drive value.
Such as?
So the first is the area of smart connected care. And as I mentioned, we do have our medication management and lab information, but there's a lot more that can be done in that space. And so we are looking both at how we make our existing products smart and connected and software enabled, but also, bigger, opportunities in the world that are complementary to our products where we could, and Vichy may have shared a little bit of that, but that's one. The second is the shift toward more decentralized care, in the interest of cost and patient satisfaction. And so we're very interested in how to enable those new care settings. We recently acquired Parata, which provides retail pharmacy automation. So, we have a good expertise in what happens in the hospital from the pharmacy to the patient, but then using that expertise and acquiring this platform to really scale the opportunity in retail and even bring some of that automation potentially back into the acute care setting.
When you think about adjacencies, do proprietary pharmaceuticals or therapeutics factor into where Becton Dickinson might go or should logically go as you think about connectedness and things like that?
So are you thinking like traceability of those like high-end drugs or
just traceability? I mean, whatever direction that question would prompt, but some proprietary therapeutics that might fit a company that is creating a connected pharmacy.
Yeah. I mean, I think
maybe a generics business.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we would get into the business of like making, drugs themselves, but we do have, pharma is a big customer of ours. So we have a pharmaceutical systems business that provides pre-filled syringes, glass syringes that are, used, for injection. And we're also developing wearable, patch devices that can deliver drugs subcutaneously. So we do partner with pharma on those high-end and biotech in particular. Right. In that area, but I don't think we're going to go that far.
Does that require a whole new skill set? Do those kinds of opportunities require whole new skill sets for the CTO or the R&D team? I mean, people who AI would be, and even digital would certainly be new technology capabilities. But as Becton Dickinson has come together through the merger or the integration of these 3 entities, do you find that the profile of the people who work for you in your area of responsibility changing? Do you hire pharmacologists or pharmacokinetic folks?
Yeah, I mean, we do more, from the pharma side, we're doing more of the container biocompatibility work. So we do help a lot, especially with small biotechs on like their regulatory submissions and ensuring that we've got good, stability of the drugs. But, we're not necessarily getting into the pharmacokinetics at this point. But certainly we do always evolve our capabilities, and as we set that ambition toward more connected care, hiring more software engineers, more data scientists, and complementing that with our core more hardware oriented capabilities is very important and can be challenging given that it's a very high demand capability.
So as I said before, in the technologies in which it plays, I'm not certain everybody viewing this appreciates what a dominant and what a major player Becton Dickinson is. But you also sell technologies all over the world. What is the geographical say cover that you would put on this or flavor? Do you think about technologies in terms of their global reach? One of the most interesting technology transfers for any company, I think, as I've seen over the years, has been the way Becton Dickinson took a very highly commoditized product line in needles and syringes, and when the AIDS epidemic hit, transformed what had been a low margin business into a totally revitalized because of the AIDS epidemic, and that had a global impact. I don't mean to mix too many points in there, but talk about the global perspective. I mean, are you designing different products for different geographies across the globe?
Yeah, certainly when we're doing our needs finding and determining where we want to be, I was sharing, it's so important to do, global ethnography and really understand the differences in practice. And I learned that early on, spending time in Japan and realizing what was needed for orthopedics. I'd say we generally try to get that global input and then design a product that can work, holistically. But for example, in China, catheter placement is a slightly different technique, and it's more of a side placement versus a inline. And so I think being aware of those, maybe accidents of history, but have driven, certain clinical practice. Also in China, the opportunities in oncology and the high incidence of liver cancer and lung cancer. We actually have a team, based in Greater Asia and in China that's, really helping us get the right insights and also accelerate the time to market into those areas, from a regulatory standpoint. So I would say that's, for Greater Asia, we do have some dedicated, insights. Most of our R&D footprint is in Europe and the US. So there's kind of a natural critical mass.
Do you have a separate R&D team in Europe, or you just have?
So our pharmaceutical systems headquarters is in Europe, and then we also have a big site in Ireland that serves all of our businesses as well. So actually 2 sites in Ireland.
So the geographic perspective or angle, if you want to call it that, on technology development raises a question of to what degree is your technology development driven by the so-called by the customer base, or the so-called, in particular, the so-called economic buyer. I mean, I would imagine particularly one of the things that the AIDS crisis made clear to Becton Dickinson was that the technologies that were going to be used to address the AIDS crisis, particularly in terms of the evolution from a kind of conventional needle and syringe to a safety needle and syringe, a lot of that was driven by, the customer base that you were serving. Does the economic buyer or the non-clinician buyer play a role in shaping where you take your technologies, and if so, in what way?
Yeah, certainly. And through my career over the last 25 years, I'm sure all of us have seen the shift from it was really the physician calling the shots to a much more complex set of stakeholders, and I think for a good reason that we do need to ensure we have good outcomes at a cost that we can afford within the healthcare system. So we very much think about at the early stages of a product, what is the economic value proposition, what's the clinical value proposition, and getting the right inputs as we think about pricing and evidence that would be required to support the claims.
Is that a sustainable strategy for Becton Dickinson as it seeks to expand its portfolio? And there was a time, I mean, one of the interesting things about the shift to safety syringes was that I having covered hospital purchasing during the 70s and 80s, Becton Dickinson was kind of the poster child for the companies that found themselves at a great disadvantage in dealing with the so-called economic buyer, the large healthcare systems that began to dominate the U.S. delivery system. And Becton Dickinson, because of the safety syringe, actually weathered that very well. They were able to hold their ground much more clearly. If you were, or let's say back in the days when you were working in the surgical side, or if we were talking to an interventional cardiology company, where you're talking to an orthopedics company, it would be clear where the product purchase influence was. Where does the product purchase influence lie for Becton Dickinson and its core product lines today? And how much does that purchaser, however you define it, whether it's someone on the pharmacy side or someone within a hospital, how much sway do they have in insisting on a Becton Dickinson product in the way that they might insist on a Zimmer hip,
Yep.
or a Medtronic pacemaker?
Yeah.
that kind of economic buyer, how influential are they for most of BD's product lines?
I mean, certainly like in the kind of core medication delivery and medication management, like that's at the hospital system level. So we definitely have conversations with procurement, right, in addition to the clinical stakeholders, and ensuring that we do have cost-effective, solutions. And we're very focused on cost, and especially with the significant amount of inflation that we've experienced over the past couple of years, how we continue to innovate and be more efficient with our supply chain so that we don't need to pass that cost, on to our customers, who we know are also strapped and dealing with their own labor inflation. So continuing to have that as a core of what we do, day in, day out, and reducing the cost of our products. But at the same time, we have solutions that are really changing the game in terms of, the efficiency of our solutions, like, for example, the retail pharmacy example that I gave. If we can automate, we also have robotic systems to automate the microbiology in the hospital, so that we can really drive efficient workflows and kind of minimize the more mundane manual tasks, and then augmenting that with AI. So with our Keystra microbiology solution that has the robotic automation, we also have an AI trained algorithm that can look at the plates themselves.
Does AI fall within your area of responsibility?
Yeah, I mean,
is that a new skill set?
Yeah, it's
what does AI mean for the technology that Becton Dickinson puts into the marketplace?
What does AI mean?
I mean, how is it applicable?
That's the example I was going to share is with we have a ability to read, to image the plates and to identify if there's growth or no growth on a plate, and to actually triage the no growth plates. So then the technicians and scientists can focus on where there is growth and get that susceptibility testing to get the right antibiotic to the patient sooner. So that's where we're seeing a lot of uptake, is when we can provide more streamlined solutions that are automated and use artificial intelligence to make jobs easier. On the medication management side, we have modules around the inventory management of the medications within the hospital to really help prevent shortages and manage inventory in a most cost-effective way. So those are the areas where you can kind of focus on like the cost of a particular syringe, and we continue to drive efficiency there, but we're also trying to get the right insights to help hospital systems solve the problems that they have.
From your perspective, is AI and digital technology part of the same general area, or are they two different ways of thinking about some of the newer technology horizons that a company like BD wrestles with?
I mean, digital technology can mean a lot of different things. I think of it at the foundation is like, first, you just have to have foundational connectivity, and then once you have the connectivity and you can pull in the data, then the AI or even just simple algorithms can be used to get the right insights to help automate or solve problems. So and then digital can also be the interface and being mobile. There's a lot of aspects to digital, but certainly AI is a exciting component, and especially the generative AI and large language models that are taking off. We're trying to make sense of what that could mean for the future.
Do you bring that into the R&D department, excuse me, or do you set up separate functions or areas within Becton Dickinson to tackle that? I mean, imagine there's a whole different skill set to develop an AI system or a digital system than might be conventionally needed or used in a needle and syringe or blood collection company.
Yeah.
Are you building new teams to tackle these areas?
We do. I mean, we have, so through the CareFusion acquisition, today we have over 2,000 software engineers within BD, which may be surprising.
That's software leaders?
Yeah, software engineers. Yeah,
software engineers.
And software quality software engineers. So they're the critical mass is kind of in the medication management, but we have a core central software team that does service all of the businesses across BD, and we're really working together to get to a common connectivity architecture, so then we can do all the things that we want to do in connecting the dots, with the data and making an impact. So I would say we have that capability embedded at the businesses. We have a central team, and then we do a lot with partnerships both from a cloud and AI perspective. We're working with a lot of, big tech companies to, as well as, kind of boutique startups who have good expertise.
With those partnerships with the tech companies, are you going to them with perceived needs that you have and ask them for their help in helping you solve those problems, or are you, how do those kinds of collaborations
I think
work?
we certainly are defining the need, and I would say it's coming together to solve the problem. So our team, side by side, with, whether it's AWS or Microsoft are two of the big partners that we work with.
So if you think about where taking the next generation of technologies for BD come from, I would imagine that Vichy and business development is a critical partner in shaping where those technologies come from. In terms of something like, well, the CareFusion and the Bard acquisition, very high level acquisitions, but how does a tuck-in acquisition or an adjacency acquisition, how does that operate or come to fruition within Becton Dickinson? Do you play, does CTO and R&D play a role in assessing those opportunities? Do you play a role in directing those opportunities?
Yep. Yeah. So in general, for the tuck-ins, the source of those ideas comes at the business unit level, because they're more adjacent, tuck-ins that are can fit in within a business. So usually the business leader and their team will bring that forward, and then we have a committee, kind of central committee that I'm a part of, along with Vichy and others, to really vet those technologies. And I would say, depending on the size of the deal, I'll be more or less involved. So for Parata, I was certainly under the hood with that. For some of the smaller, we've actually done, I think it's 19 tuck-ins since 2020 and deployed about $3 billion in capital. So
if it's not proprietary, what's the kind of range that you're looking for in terms of kinds of deal sizes that Becton Dickinson is comfortable with in doing those kinds of deals?
Yeah, I think in general, we would like to do more Parata type deals that, can move the needle a little bit faster. But at the same time, especially in the interventional space, there's more, kind of string of pearls type, for example, with our venous portfolio and peripheral intervention, we've had multiple, smaller tuck-ins, but they're all coming together with a very solid strategy that can solve, major disease states in the venous space.
So the business unit folks obviously play a major role because they understand the technology very well and they understand the marketplace very well. But to what extent do the sales and marketing teams within Becton Dickinson play a role, to your mind, in shaping where the portfolio goes next? Do you listen to the field sales reps or to folks on the marketing, sales and marketing side in identifying new opportunities or new places to go for Becton Dickinson?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, partnering with the sales organization, to do, ride-alongs and really see what they're seeing as well. We have a strategic customer group in both US and Europe that can get us more of that C-level, insights. So we definitely, want to, partner closely for that early access and getting the innovative ideas. And then certainly as we're going through new product development, we've got like an amazing team of like field nurses that really know
nurses, right? Sure.
Yeah, the kind of practice of care, and so they're helping to do clinical, training, for our customers, but we actually bring them in along the way to test our products as well, and to kind of tell us if we're on track or off track, and very valuable feedback.
So thinking, when did you join Becton Dickinson?
In 2019.
In 2019, so that's 3 or 4 years ago. How different would you say Becton Dickinson's technology portfolio is today from when you joined? And how different do you think it will be? I would say 4 years. That's such a short time frame. Let's say 5 years from now.
Sure. Yeah. So as I mentioned, I think 6 and 8 years ago, with the major acquisitions of CareFusion and Bard, those were very transformational in terms of the portfolio. Over the last 4 years, what we've worked to do, Tom, myself, and the entire team, is to refine where we want to invest and to really define where we see the greatest opportunity for impact and growth, and being able to double down in those areas. So we, I think, have cut the long tail of more incremental innovation. And you'd maybe worry, is that going to cut like the actual impact? But our new product revenues are, continuing to go up because we're choosing more meaningful innovation and we're focusing and executing it better because we have that focus. And that I was talking to the fellows earlier today. I think that was a big lesson of the pandemic. That when we focused on getting, the diagnostics, both molecular and rapid antigen, we were able to do our rapid antigen test within 14 weeks, which is, something that BD wouldn't have thought possible. Of course, the regulatory path was, more streamlined, but it was all about the focus and the call to action that just drove everyone to roll up their sleeves and make those things happen that we didn't think were possible. And so I think even though it was a difficult time, the fact that we had that purpose-driven innovation, we're really translating that to how we think about innovation moving forward. And I think for the next 5 years, that's really where I want to push us even further, to really be bold and make sure every product is, very differentiated and driving meaningful, not just clinical, but also economic value, because I think the economic equation is becoming.
Well, how do the people within Becton Dickinson who play a role in shaping the product portfolio think about relationships with the venture-backed startup community that's such a central part of this geography right here? I mean, if you think about over the last, let's say half dozen years, a number of different models have emerged. I mean, obviously, M&A is one key aspect of that relationship, but other models have emerged, like corporate venture capital, build to buy programs.
Yep.
There may be some others on the horizon, other ways of thinking about how big companies and small venture-backed companies can work. How do you see Becton Dickinson's either relationship with or perspective on that particular community? How do you see that evolving, and what role do you think that community will play in shaping where Becton Dickinson technology portfolio goes in the next couple of years?
No, it's a great question. I think it's been a little bit maybe more binary historically of it's, organic or it's an acquisition.
Right.
And I think I've in the last month had probably at least 2 or 3 conversations with different funds about some of the models that you highlighted. And I think in particular, if there's, a startup company that we're very excited about, but maybe isn't quite ready, to go all in terms of, an acquisition, some of those partnerships like build to buy are very interesting to have like a set milestone exit, assuming everything goes well, but to, bring that capital to kind of cross the chasm of feasibility. So you're very open-minded. We don't do a lot of corporate venture capital. We have done equity investments in a select set of assets. So I'd say in general, we're open-minded, but we're, selective in terms of, using those types of models.
The corporate VC is particularly well targeted to the broader interest of a large corporation. But as you think about what comes across your desk and the desk of Vichy and maybe some other, even maybe the division heads at your company, do you find a relevance to where BD wants to go and where it wants to add in the companies that are going to be funded in this community? I mean, I'm trying to think of companies that are innovative in what I would think of as core Becton Dickinson's historic portfolio, and I can't say I can think of very many.
Yeah, I mean, we have a pretty full funnel. So I'll say both, at scale, kind of larger assets, like I said, Parata-sized as well as smaller. So, I'm not going to be able to tell you all the secrets, but we're very, excited about what we're seeing. And it's, some of the bigger ones you need to take a little more time to cultivate and figure out. But, I think there's still a lot.
But you must also, I mean, given BD's prominence in its core product lines, you must also be a target and an obvious place to start. If I were a technology developer working on an innovative technology that I thought particularly suited Becton Dickinson, and not so much on the pharmacy side, but maybe in the more traditional hospital supply side, where do I begin to work with you to show you what I'm doing and assess if there's interest there?
Yeah, I mean, so I saw a couple ideas today that, through the Biodesign fellows and alum, I think it's really just, kind of connecting through, conferences and, just, the network, primarily I would say into the most relevant business. It's going to be able to, assess, the market, the technology, most effectively. So I think, yeah, we should be, every business has a, business development lead, and I would think that they would be known, but if you need any, help with the Rolodex, from this team, would be happy to help make some more connections.
So we've had a wide-ranging discussion here and touch on a couple of things, but I wonder, as you think about the next several years or the next step up, what do you think are the most pressing issues that Becton Dickinson will be facing as a corporation, and whether those are going to be more technology driven, or whether they're going to be more, kind of governance issues? What is going to be the most important forces shaping where Becton Dickinson's portfolio goes? Certainly something like a kind of global health epidemic, right, like AIDS was in the 80s.
Yeah, let's hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, hope that doesn't happen again.
Ours,
but those are the kinds of things that don't necessarily affect. I mean, AIDS probably had only, Josh may correct me on this, had only the most tangential impact on, say, interventional cardiology community. When you think about something like the COVID pandemic, probably hit a company like Becton Dickinson as hard, if not harder, than interventional cardiology companies. What are the things that keep you up at night thinking about, we have to start addressing that issue now, because that's going to be a major influence on us?
Yeah, a few major factors, and I'd say this impacting medtech as a whole. Number one is just, the macroeconomic environment is, very complex, and, the combination of inflation and then just, the cost pressures, in the healthcare system. So like I was saying earlier, how much of that inflation we can absorb, so that we don't need to pass that on to our customers, and still funding innovation. So it really causes us to be very sharp in terms of all aspects of the P&L and being very efficient, so that we can continue to drive innovation and impact. So I think that's number one. The second is just the proliferation of complexity in regulatory environments around the world, that everyone's kind of developing, their own, requirements, and generally higher level of, evidence and documentation and everything. So to sustain our in-market products is, much more expensive than it used to be. And so we have to be very diligent about our portfolio and, discontinuing products that aren't, driving as much impact, and then being as efficient as possible as we can with our, the sustaining part, again, so we can continue to innovate. Well,
to the extent that one of your principal goals, as it is for the entire organization, is to sustain and build on the market presence. I don't want to say dominance, let's say market presence of Becton Dickinson right now. Do you think that will be driven more by technological innovation going forward? Will be driven more by economics? What are the key factors that will make certain that Becton Dickinson remains one of the dominant medical device companies from a global perspective?
I really believe we can solve the economic problems with innovation, and some of the examples that I mentioned, if we can really understand. There's so much waste in the healthcare system and substandard outcomes, and that's where we think about in our personal lives what digital technology has been able to give us in terms of efficiency and more personalized experience. Like that, I think is it is technology solving the economic and the health equity issues that we face today.
So you raised health equity because we talked about that in a call prior to this session. What does health equity mean? That was a major theme at the TCT conference, down in downtown San Francisco. What is health equity? Because one of the things I've wrestled with or struggled with is how to understand the practical application, the practical implications of a concept like health equity for technology-driven companies.
Right. Yeah. And, if I think about health equity in the simplest sense, I think it's, finding the opportunities for people to live the healthiest life possible, regardless of who you are, where you live, how much money you make. So that's, foundationally, when we think about how we can impact health equity, similar to what I was talking about with M&A, I think you've got to think about the core of technology and solutions that you have, and with that innovation, then pursuing public-private partnerships to kind of bring that technology solution to a broader set of patients. And one example of that we have is we have a HPV molecular screening assay that provides the broadest set of genotyping, to be able to identify the various strains and to know whether a patient would be at high risk for developing cervical cancer. And, this is moving toward more of a primary screening, versus PAP, particularly in Europe, and that trend is happening globally. One of the areas that we've invested in Europe, and we're also partnering with the White House and the Cancer Moonshot, is self-collection samples, so that patients who, or individuals who don't have that access to care, don't have a primary care doctor, would be able to take a sample and screen. And it's not enough, though, just to have the technology and the claim. You also need to activate, from an education perspective, and have people be aware of how they can,
I think that's an interesting example of something that sounds like a logical extension or adjacency, but the actual execution is incredibly difficult, because it takes you into maybe not totally different, but very different areas and very different skill sets than you've built. And the success of a company like Becton Dickinson is built on legacy skill sets and expertise and perspectives. But when you get into something like that, that's a whole new ballgame.
Yeah.
In making that successful.
Yeah, I mean, the technology itself, and the ability to do self-collection, there is some science, but that's pretty, core. I think it is understanding more of what are the barriers, and that it is partnering, right, to kind of access, help those patients get access. That's not our expertise. And then we do actually have great policy capability as well, in Washington, that's helping to drive more open-mindedness about, patients actually can self-collect and get, good accuracy. So,
well, as you drive this, you mentioned before the global perspective here. It's interesting how interrelated these things all are. But it seems to me that healthcare systems differ all over the world, and a strategy may be formulated for the U.S. It may not work as well in Europe, and vice versa. Is there a consistent vision, or do these have to be planned for individual geographies?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me that Africa must be a huge opportunity that not a lot of medical device companies would identify or focus on, given just differences of healthcare systems.
Right. Yeah, and I was really encouraged to see what we're doing with the Biodesign program, in Rwanda, and setting up the fellowship program. So I think getting more local insights to drive innovation is a first step.
And is that a commercial financial opportunity, or is that a kind of corporate responsibility opportunity? Like it's like Becton Dickinson should do that because it suits your skills, it suits your portfolio well, and will have a tremendous impact on people, on millions, if not billions, of people you otherwise would not touch. Or there's the justification for doing that. There are huge untapped markets in places like Africa that aren't being tapped right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think today our portfolio is, most relevant we have we sell over 35 billion devices a year, and a lot of these are for less than $1. So if you think about the blood collection tubes, catheters, syringes, like those are backbone of healthcare that are certainly needed everywhere, including Africa, and there is access. And we invest in nurse training in Africa, to be able, in I think 16 countries throughout, to really build up the nursing capabilities. Also infectious disease, and in particular, outside the U.S., tuberculosis in sub-Saharan Africa, Eastern Europe is a issue, and antimicrobial resistance is also a big issue in Southeast Asia and in sub-Saharan Africa. So we have a lot of the diagnostic tools that are available to do that. We have a portfolio that's scalable. So we have, the high end, but we also have the ones that can work, functionally in kind of a lower throughput, environment. So it is, I think we need to think about our portfolio and ensure that we are developing the markets. And then there's an aspect of corporate social responsibility where we're investing in the ecosystem and, partnering, with the governments to be able to get the right infrastructure and training.
Well, when you think about these kinds of issues as BD confronts them, is there a more obvious similarity between the U.S. and Europe with the rest of the world as kind of an outlier that needs to be tackled in different terms? Is this primarily a U.S. European phenomenon, or are there global approaches that you could take
with regard to
things like health equity or economics, education? Getting, I would particularly things like immunization, which is absolutely critical. That's got to differ from geography to geography.
Yeah, and we do have like very simple, like Uniject and Solo Shot, that can be used for vaccination that is even less expensive than what I was mentioning. For some of our syringes that are available in higher cost markets. So yeah, I think it is, very much we need to be thinking globally and kind of being very specific about the relevant portfolio, and then in certain areas augmenting with public-private partnerships to be able to make sure we can, access and use those technologies in a safe and effective way.
Well, this has been a really impressive discussion. In terms of introduction of concepts and ideas and thoughts that I would not have applied to such a great degree to a company like Becton Dickinson. Before we end, because we're getting right to the end of the list, I think we do have time for some Q&A, and I do think that there's a microphone that is going to be floating around there. It is in the back of the room. There's a question right at the end.
Hi, Beth.
Hi.
You mentioned about digital technologies helping in innovation at BD. Can you comment on which countries are adopting these digital technologies more, and where some of these data AI/ML solutions are embraced and moving faster?
Yeah, I
would maybe also, what are the hurdles you're facing?
Right. I'd say so far, the U.S., even though it feels very fragmented, has at least standard EMRs and protocols for data sharing. So in the U.S. is where we have had the most uptake of our solutions in connected medication management. In the lab space, probably more U.S. and Europe, but it's generally connectivity within the lab, not necessarily to the full hospital yet. So I think there's more complexity around privacy aspects and just more diffuse kind of EMR systems that can make it harder to live into what we're talking about. But we certainly are very interested in continuing to think about U.S. and Europe in particular, for these solutions. Asia is a little different, and we haven't gotten too deep in that area yet.
So one other question for me. We talked a little bit more about the economic buyer, or the role of the customer in shaping it. Becton Dickinson is one of the kind of great legacy brands in medical products, medical devices. To what extent do you think BD's position or role in the marketplace is driven by brand loyalty and customer loyalty to a brand that they've been dealing with for hundreds of years? Certainly, I would think that. I know that when I used to cover group purchasing a lot, one of the issues that anybody who wanted to compete with Becton Dickinson faced was that there was just tremendous loyalty at the nursing level around products that they were trained on and familiar with as they came out of training in school. So what do you think that value of that brand is to the success of Becton Dickinson in current technologies and future technologies?
I think certainly having a trusted brand over 125 years helps. I would just say we have to earn it every single day. And continuing to innovate, continuing to focus on quality, continuing to focus on supply chain as well. Because I think through the pandemic, that was an area that we helped bolster loyalty because we were able to supply when some of our competitors could not. So I think it helps, but we certainly
was Becton Dickinson affected as much as some of the other device companies by the pandemic? Because it would seem to me that a lot of the technologies that are core to Becton Dickinson were still required during pandemic, but the drop or the decline in elective procedures certainly had to affect the volume of some of the technologies that you put out.
Yeah, that is how it played out. And really we just had to like hustle and do a great job, with our supply chain. Luckily we do have global manufacturing like throughout the world. So, we weren't tied to a particular location, but the chip shortage.
But you might defer that elective procedure because you're concerned about being in a hospital.
Yeah.
But you're not ever going to not draw blood or.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, especially in critical care, there was more demand because there were, ICUs were full. So yeah, it was kind of, balanced out. There were, ups and downs. I think that's the advantage of BD is that we have such a diverse portfolio. When things happen, when shocks happen in certain places, we can generally absorb and compensate.
Great. Well, this has been a fast. Oh, there's another question down here. The microphone, because we want to record it.
Hi, I was just going to ask if you want to speak during COVID. We see an increased demand for disposables, and I was just wondering if you want to speak to your sustainability policy.
Yeah, thank you. Sustainability is a big focus, especially given what I mentioned, over 35 billion products. So we really need.
What do you mean by sustainability in the context of this question?
Okay, so sustainable. I'm thinking primarily from an environmental and planet health perspective, but we could talk about a lot of aspects to that. But about 2 years ago, we started up a Sustainable Medical Technology Institute within BD to really be focused on this issue, and certainly. Thinking about our carbon footprint and, all, end to end from, the build all the way through to the disposal of our products. Also looking at the.
Did that initiative reshape your portfolio in identifiable ways?
Yeah, so we're on the journey, right? So we've set the goal to be completely net zero by 2050. So, I mean, that seems like a long way out, but we're actually establishing the glide path this year. So we'll have, targets that can be tracked, just like our Scope 1 emissions from our operations are already being tracked and progressing according to plan. The biggest challenge really is around the disposal of the products. That's where a big part of the carbon footprint is. And so we're actually investing in recycling programs. And one example in the United States with a company called Cassak. Cassak was actually we have very high quality, plastics and was recycling some of our manufacturing scrap. But we said, how do we take that further to be, collect? And so we've been collecting, sharps and sharp containers and syringes through Casella. And I think it was about 40,000 pounds just over the last year that we brought back and can reuse. So I think the, recyclability is going to be a real key part of this. We're also focusing on the packaging. That's a lot easier place to start than the product, materials itself, because they're so interrelated with medications and that kind of thing. So
to do that, you've really got to either have buy-in or some kind of coordination with the customer base.
Yeah.
To pull that kind of program together.
Right. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And around the world, I'd say Europe is definitely more ahead, but big systems like Kaiser, we're talking a lot about materials of concern as well as carbon footprint. So I'd say the investor community was probably the kind of ahead of the game in terms of like putting pressure on companies. And I think we've, taken that call to action very seriously, and our customers are starting to, highlight sustainability.
Isn't it? I would agree. Sustainability, I hear a lot from European companies, much less so from American companies.
Yeah.
Although a company like Becton Dickinson is so large and has such a kind of broad mandate that it's got to be part of your thinking.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, we're right up against time. It's 6:59. We have a reception starting in 1 minute. So let's thank Beth for coming and sharing her insights. The reception, I think, is upstairs, and I don't know exactly where, but there's some tables out there. So thank you all for coming, and thank you for those who were viewing this remotely. And thanks to Josh and the Biodesign team for putting this program together.
Thank you.